Welcome into the Simmons Scoop. We have Director of Recruiting Chad Simmons here, and we are going to get into some of the nitty-gritty of recruiting. But guys, do me a favor before we get going, hit subscribe to the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube, the On3 Recruits channel. We are growing, and we need you guys to be a part of it. All right, so for today's show with Chad Simmons, I wanted to take a look at a graphic that was tweeted by the On3 Recruits channel of the top uncommitted recruits in America, and it also has their recruiting prediction machine score next to their name. So I want to, now that we got Chad here, I want to talk to him about whether or not he agrees with the recruiting prediction machine, the RPM, on these top prospects. So let's bring in the great Chad Simmons, Director of Recruiting here at On3. And Chad, we are just going to start with the number one overall. He is uncommitted. His name is Jackson Cantwell. The big ol' offensive tackle from Missouri has two teams at the top of his recruiting prediction machine. I want to see what you think about this. We have, the recruiting prediction machine has Mizzou at 17% and Michigan at 15%. Do you think that represents his recruitment right now?
Yeah, I would say no, Josh. I mean, I think you have to put up there in that top group. And I think Michigan definitely is making a surge here. They had them on campus again last week and here recently, and they're doing a great job. I think, Oregon's up there, Georgia's up there. I think obviously the connection to Missouri with his parents, that's the in-state school. They're making him a top priority. Right now, I was saying he's trending away from the in-state school, Missouri, okay. And other school would be higher.
Yeah, I'd probably put Georgia, maybe Oregon or Michigan, but I'd probably have Georgia in that top spot with whatever percentage it is. I still think it's close, though. All right, let's move on to number two, offensive tackle Emmanuel Ihenacho, and we are looking at his percentages with Maryland at 30% and Penn State at 18%.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, as far as the top school, he's been pretty open about that the last few weeks. Now, look, his recruitment has had a lot of ebbs and flows already, and who's in the top spot. I mean, but Maryland holds that spot right now, so I think that 30% is a good representation about where he's at with his top schools. Who's running number two? Is it Penn State? Is it Texas A&M? He's fresh off a trip to LSU. Auburn's in there, Oregon. A lot of different schools are battling for that next spot, but I do like where Maryland sits right now.
All right, we move on to number one quarterback, number three overall quarterback, Jared Curtis. And it's a close one. We know it's a close one between Oregon and Georgia, but let's look at the percentages here. We got Oregon at 54% and Georgia at 37%.
Yeah, I would say I disagree, with that one. I would say, man, it's almost too close to call. I mean, he's going back to Georgia next week, then Oregon right after that, and then making a decision early in May. This could go either way. If I had to say right now, today, as we shoot this, Josh, I would lean Georgia slightly, maybe 51-49. I mean, it's super close. You have Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart against Will Stein and Dan Lanning. We know it's one of those two schools, but coming off that last round of visits, I would slightly lean, as of today, what I'm hearing, Georgia's way, but still two big visits to go here.
Yeah, I agree with the 51-49. Maybe I'd lean a little bit toward Oregon, but like you said, it's really a coin flip at this point. Two visits on tap. That decision will come on Cinco de Mayo. All right, Felix Ojo, the big offensive tackle out of the state of Texas. We got Texas trending at 89% with Oklahoma at 3%. Are you buying Texas in a landslide right here?
I'm buying. I'm all in here, Josh, with this one. I mean, I like where Texas sits. Obviously, an in-state prospect, in-state target. Sark loves him. Kyle Flood loves him. He loves them in return. I mean, I'm really trying to figure out, is Oklahoma number two or who is number two? I mean, is there a number two? I think right now it's pretty clear Texas is setting the pace. We know recruiting is very fluid and things can change, but right now I'm all in with this one.
All right, I agree. The recruiting prediction machine has this one nailed. Let's move on to number one linebacker Tyler Atkinson, the number one player in the state of Georgia. We got Georgia trending at 35%, and then you got Auburn in there at 12%.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Georgia's an in-state school, offered him in middle school. He's been there 10-plus times, very familiar with the program, the community, the staff. They've already sat down and gone over film, and then he knows the fit. And obviously, Georgia kind of speaks for itself from a developmental standpoint and what they do with linebackers there. But look, there's a long way to go in this race. Today, Yes, I agree. He's back at USC this weekend. He was at
Hmm.
Oregon here recently. He was at Georgia in March as well. Auburn, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, Clemson. A long list of schools are battling, but right now I do like where Georgia sits on this RPM.
I like where Georgia sits, but I think it should be more like 75, 80% right now for Tyler Atkinson, not 35%.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where the numbers really reflect maybe his interest there, but I do like how they're the top school,
Yeah.
on the list per se,
Represented. Yeah.
where they
Yeah.
kind of sit there. Yeah.
Who would you have represented in number two? Because I don't think it would be Auburn. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I don't know who it would be. I'm thinking USC, Oregon, Clemson, Ohio State. Who would you put in that number two slot, even if it's a low percentage?
Yeah, I mean, look, coming off, he went to Oregon for the first time in March. I mean, he was trying to go there in January, had the flu,
Yeah.
had to push it back to March. And look, they blew him away. There's no doubt. Spent a couple of days there. They're definitely up there. But I'll say this and what you said about Auburn. Don't sleep on Auburn. He's been there almost as much as he has to Georgia's in-state or close to the school, the neighboring state school at Auburn. Kenyatta Watson, former coach at
Yeah.
Grayson, is on that Auburn staff.
Yeah.
He knows people there. They're trending for his quarterback, Travis Burgess, right now as well. So don't sleep on Auburn. I don't know if I would say they're number two right now, but they're definitely in that
Mm-hmm.
upper group, I would say, as far as Auburn goes.
All right, let's see if we agree with this one. Quarterback Ryder Lyons. There's been a lot of talk about him on this channel recently. Now we're seeing USC trending at 97%, and Ole Miss, who's getting him on campus this weekend, holding some market share at 1%.
Yeah, look, this is a tough one. Like for me, I would say I disagree. I would
Mm-hmm.
take the field right now over USC if I had to pick. Look, you asked me 6 months ago. I would have been all USC. I thought he was close to committing. I think he would say the same to USC, like late last summer, early in the season, in the fall. Like you mentioned, going to Ole Miss, Michigan's very much involved here. He likes that system under Chip Lindsey, what they're doing under Sharon Moore at Michigan. One to watch, obviously, is BYU. He has multiple connections to that. He's going to go on a mission trip. So even though he's named a top 2026 quarterback, he'll actually be part of the 2027 class. So a lot to think about and kind of how he's looking at different schools, who they're bringing in this cycle, next cycle. Oregon's very much involved as well. But right now, I would say simply, I do not agree
Mm-hmm.
with USC having 97%.
Yeah, and I agree with that. He very well might end up at USC, but I don't think it's a runaway right now at 97%. All right, moving on to number one running back in America, Savion Hyder, and we're looking at his recruiting prediction machine score. Georgia at 28%, in Ohio State at 21%. How would you change this one at all?
Yeah, I would change it. I mean, I think we talked, Josh, a little bit about this one being a little bit older, maybe having an older vibe, older feel to Georgia being up there. Right now is Big Ten versus SEC. You have Michigan and Ohio State versus Georgia and Tennessee for the elite running back in Virginia. And I would put the Big Ten programs over the SEC programs right now. And I'd have Michigan running one and Ohio State running two. Recent visits to both programs and Ann Arbor and Columbus. So I would disagree with this one
Mm-hmm.
and kind of flip the script with Michigan and Ohio State in those top two spots.
Yeah, and Georgia's sitting well with a bunch of running back targets, so they'll still recruit Savion Hyder. But I agree, this one's shaping up to be a rivalry battle up in Big Ten country. Let's move on to cornerback Brandon Arrington, and this one might be a little dated. We got Texas A&M sitting at 83% and USC at 5%. Today, how do you see it?
Yeah, he's had multiple, wow me type visits, in recent weeks, recent months. And this even goes back to A&M, like last summer, had him in the fall on campus. And at that time, I would agree with this RPM, but we're not at that time anymore.
Right.
I think obviously Alabama did a great job early in March and really kind of grabbed that momentum. Oregon's always been in this. USC's in his backyard. Right now, if I was making my own RPM for Brandon Arrington, I would put it a pretty close battle between USC and Alabama
Mm-hmm.
as those top two schools. He's from Southern California. Family grew up following USC. He was there recently. They're making him a top priority. And then Alabama blew him away. They have great connections to Southern California, grabbing guys from modern day the last few years. And having those kind of connections are big. And
Yeah.
I think those two would be my guys or my top two on that RPM right now today. Again, AM's in this, they'll get him back on campus, but I disagree with them being the heavy favorite right now.
All right, let's move on to edge Anthony Jones from the state of Alabama. And boy, do we have a rivalry recruiting battle brewing right here. Bama favored at 35%, Auburn at 24%. You think there's any chance he leaves the state of Alabama?
I would say slight. He was at Texas A&M recently, tried to get back to LSU, but weather held him up earlier in March as well. He'll take some trips, but I think you painted the picture correctly, man. A major in-state battle, the Iron Bowl, Auburn versus Alabama. I do like how they have it set up as far as Bama having the edge. I might widen that gap a little bit, at this point with Alabama sitting in a good spot. But I like where Bama sits. Auburn running, second. We'll see if anybody can chip away and try to get him out of this state. But right now, I like Bama over Auburn for Anthony Jones.
All right, let's move on to the number one safety in America, Braylon Womack. Now, we got Ohio State trending at 77% and Auburn at 6%. Do you agree with this after the commitment of Blaine Bradford, who's the number 2 ranked safety in America, to Ohio State? Does that at all skew the way that you look at the RPM when it comes to Braylon Womack?
Yeah, I don't think that Bradford loan commit, really changes things too much when they're trying to sign multiple DBs. Womack, like Bradford's an elite safety this cycle. So you want to add guys and make that room as good and as deep as you can. With that said, I don't think Ohio State is trending right now based on what I hear. I like where he was at this past weekend in Texas A&M. When I went to see Braylon back in February, he came out in those denim blue jeans, cowboy boots. I mean, he kind of fits that personality of what I think about College Station in Texas A&M. Coach Ish, Coach Elko, that staff are making him feel like a top priority. He loves the scheme. He loves the fit. So for me, I disagree with Ohio State being the top school. I like Texas A&M in that spot. Auburn definitely is battling, coming on strong. They had him back on campus in March. I think it's a battle for that 2 spot between Ohio State and Auburn, with Florida running 4th. But I would disagree with this RPM and have A&M up there at the top.
All right, guys, in the comment section, talk to us. Let us know which of these recruiting prediction machine percentages do you disagree with the most, and which one of them do you agree with? Let us know. Let's talk about one of the biggest developments of the week. We got Chad Simmons here, director of recruiting at On3, and we're talking Chris Henry Jr. He shuts it down. Despite being committed to Ohio State for nearly 2 years already, he came out this week, made an announcement. You talked to him. What do you think about – I mean, it almost feels like this is a commitment for Ohio State.
Yeah, almost like a signing to me. Like when they shut it down, it's like we're at signing day and they put the pen to the paper, which maybe he did put some type of pen to some type of paper to kind of lock himself into some type of deal. That's what's happening now in recruiting these days. And look, we always knew that, he's from there, committed early. He's visited there more than anywhere else. He loves Brian Hartline, that relationship. Obviously, the wide receiver room, wide receiver development, speaks for itself with Ohio State and Brian Hartline. And this is a big development, for Ohio State. I think obviously they were working hard, recruiting him like he was uncommitted the last year and a half. We know he's been to Oregon multiple times, and including a recent trip, late in March to Eugene. They were very much a threat to Ohio State, especially when Junior Adams was there before he went to the NFL. And they brought in Ross Douglas from Syracuse. He initiated contact right away. But look, Ohio State locking him down. And he told me, look, I'm only visiting Ohio State moving forward. So if that stays true, which I have no reason to doubt Henry saying that, this is a huge win and a huge moment for Ohio State this cycle.
Yeah, and, as I said, he's been committed, he's stayed committed, but do you think this was a direct result of the kind of momentum that was building with not just Oregon, but also USC and Miami?
Yeah, I mean, look, that he's been to USC multiple times. They're in his backyard now. We see what Lincoln Riley's doing with his class, and just the last few weeks alone, the momentum they have. I mean, obviously he has teammates at Modern Day. Tom just flipped to
Yeah.
from Oregon to
Yeah, that's true.
USC. I mean, they're in his backyard. They're always having quarterbacks and throwing the ball at USC. And then I think Oregon's always been the biggest threat. I mean, Mater Day has a
Agreed.
pipeline to Oregon as well. So they signed 3 or 4 guys last year from Mater Day. He feels very comfortable up there. There's a lot of branding opportunities with Nike and what he does from a name brand standpoint at Oregon. So look, that they were fighting some tough battles there, and he was talking about taking OVs to all three, Miami, USC, and Oregon, along with Ohio State. And I think Ohio State wanted to do all they could, answer the questions, give him what he needs to get him locked in now in April, and not wait for a crazy next 5, 6 months between now and the 1st of December.
Yeah, and it's because of the caliber of player of Chris Henry Jr. I mean, you've been watching him since his 8th grade year, 9th grade year. What type of player is he bringing to Columbus when he arrives on campus?
A guy I would say first off that can play right away. He has that Jeremiah
Yeah.
Smith frame, big body, mature. And like Jeremiah, I'm not comparing him to Jeremiah. Jeremiah is kind of a unicorn. He does everything at the 5-star level, but from a body type, from a mental maturity, physical maturity. Now he's coming off a knee injury. He has to get back healthy, and have a big senior season. He'll take it light in the spring this year, but look, Chris has great ball skills, a big catch radius. He's a big physical wide receiver. He has good speed. He makes big plays on the big stage. So, look, he wants to go and compete every day with the best wide receivers in the country. He'll get that at Ohio State. He'll go against top DBs in practice, good competition every Saturday. And they're getting a player, I think, that will compete for very early playing time in Columbus.
Ohio State fans, how you feeling about the big news from Chris Henry Jr. that he's shutting it all down? Let us know how you feel. All right, let's stay right here at Modern Day High School. I want to talk to you about the number 2 tight end in America, Mark Bowman. It seems like his recruitment, I mean, it was already hot ever since he reclassified from the 2027 class up to 2026. But coming off this visit to Texas, what are you thinking about his recruitment? Who do you think the main players are?
Yeah, he was there with family for 3 or 4 days. So, I mean, this was a good trip for them getting a feel for the culture, the campus, the environment, getting their questions. They met with Sark. They met with Jeff Banks, the tight ends coach, Milwee, the OC, strength and conditioning, nutrition, academics. They watched practice. They saw dorms. So it wasn't just about Mark, a recruiting trip to go have a good time, hang out with the team, see how you feel. This was parents asking big questions, meaningful questions. Do I want my kid in this environment? Will you take care of him? Will you set him up for success after football? So this was very big for the family. And there's nothing but good vibes coming back from Mark and his parents after this trip. So Sark and company kind of knocked it out of the park, from practice to campus tour to the academic presentation to living area to nutrition, really from top to bottom. That they spent so much time around the staff, the coaches, the campus, the people. They left feeling very good about Texas, and I like where Texas sits. Look, he grew up a Texas fan. The jersey he had as a kid, I've said before in stories and maybe on this show, was Colt McCoy. So he knows all about Texas, that tradition, that history. I would label them as the team to beat coming out of this visit. At different times, I've liked Georgia. I've liked Oregon. USC is coming on strong. I think those are the main 4. Alabama's in the mix as well. He was there in March also. I would say Georgia, and if I had to give a 2-team race to watch, I still like Georgia, up there. Their tight end production speaks for itself. He has probably the best relationship with tight ends coach Todd Hartley. But then you have Oregon, you have USC. Both are very much in this. He'll get back to campus there. And then you have other schools like Ole Miss. He'll get to in April. Ohio State, he'll get there as well. So others are involved. But Texas right now made a significant move last week with just Mark and his family, really the total package there on both sides. They love him. He loves them. We'll see what happens in the coming months.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I was getting coming out of that visit. Sounds like he needed to see Texas. He did. They checked a lot of the boxes. Now we got a true heavyweight fight between Texas and Georgia for one of the best tight ends in America. All right, let's move on from one powerhouse high school to another. Down there at IMG Academy in Florida, we're going to talk about Kenyai Pepe. He is a massive offensive tackle, goes about 6'7", and it seems like he has a bi-coastal recruitment taking place. Is it Miami USC in this one?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he doesn't end up at one of those schools as of right now. We know obviously recruiting can change and new schools can jump in at any time. But right now, he was back at Miami recently, visited USC before that in March as well. He's from the West Coast. Both schools are making him a top priority. Josh Hansen at USC, Alex Mirabal at Miami. And then the surrounding supporting staffs at both schools are recruiting him every day. He gets texts, he gets calls, not just him, but his family as well. And they're both giving him a lot to think about, from playing early to playing, Big Ten football, ACC football, playing in the playoffs, development, academics, life after football, NIL. So, at different times, I felt like Miami had the edge, this time a year ago, even the summer, maybe last fall. I think USC has picked things up late in 2024, the first part of 2025, and I would give them maybe a slight edge, a month or so ago. But right now, after his last trip to Miami, the buzz coming back now is that if Miami's not maybe slightly ahead, then the race is too close to call and super tight between the Hurricanes and the Trojans. So right now, I think he takes OVs to both schools. Other schools will get visits too, but right now there's some real separation between Miami and USC and the rest of the pack.
All right, let's wrap it up with one more elite offensive lineman. We're talking about Lamar Brown. Quick question here. Is there any team that can pull him from LSU?
Yeah, I think it would be Texas A&M. That's been the school that he called his top school for a while last year. It started last summer. He worked out at D-line with Texas A&M. He returned for multiple games. He's already been this year going back again this month in April, and he has connections with that staff. And I think one big thing that hit home with him was them giving him a chance to play defensive line. They're one of the first schools to kind of initiate that, and he latched on to that, and that means something to him. Now, he's told LSU and other schools, Miami, Florida State, the other schools in the mix, that he prefers that, but he's still thinking about that. Does he think he has the better upside there and go farther with DL, or could he go back to offensive line? Of course, he's probably better there right now in most eyes as far as offensive line goes. But yeah, A&M is probably the biggest competition. He was at Miami for the pool party, had a great time in Coral Gables, and look, they've had success before, some guys in Louisiana, but at Miami. But I think right now he's LSU's to lose. Coach Peoples, Brad Davis, Brian Kelly. He's right there in Baton Rouge. A lot of things he likes about LSU, but A&M definitely is in this. They have to be considered a contender there. And if there is one school to watch outside Louisiana, it'd be that one in College Station.
All right, a lot of intel today on the Simmons Scoop. Chad Simmons, Director of Recruiting here at On3. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Josh.